Hello, fellow parents and educators. Thank you for joining me at Education Evolution, where we are disrupting the status quo in today's learning models. We talk about present-day education, what's broken, who's fixing it, and how. I'm Dr. Maureen O'Shaughnessy, your host and founder of Education Evolution and the Microschool Coalition, where we are fiercely committed to changing the narrative, to reimagining the education landscape and creating learning that serves all children and prepares them to thrive. If you are new, welcome to the podcast. Please subscribe on our website to get it delivered to your inbox weekly. If you've been around a while, have you left a review? Hi, Loren. It is so good to have you on Education Evolution today.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Listeners, today I'm talking with Loren Demeroutis of Big Picture Learning. Yay! That's a big one. Many of us know Big Picture Learning for its student-directed learning and real-world internships and mentoring. We see this model used with some of our local schools, but it's much more. We all need to be activists to end oppressive systems and create true equity. Big Picture Learning is a key educational activist. Loren, Director of Learning Big Picture, is going to dive in and address activism and the focus on humanity, connection, and even, gasp, love. Ready, Loren?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Awesome. So, Loren, Big Picture Learning's vision is, in my opinion, exactly where education needs to be. It's not this prescriptive model, but it's a whole way of viewing learning and learners. Could you explain this philosophy and how it can help end the achievement gap and lack of equity in our schools?
Yeah. Would it be okay to read the vision?
Absolutely.
So I'm reading off the website. It is our vision that all students live lives of their own design, supported by caring mentors and equitable opportunities to achieve their greatest potential. We move forward prepared to activate the power of schools, systems, and education through student-directed, real-world learning. We are activists. And to me, I think, I've seen this. I've been with Big Picture first as a administrative intern and then a principal since 2005. And I've seen this evolve over time. And I imagine our mission and vision will be written differently or expressed differently, 10 years from now. But to me, it's about interest-driven learning and putting student interests first. And one of our old mottos used to be one student at a time. And I think we're one student at a time, one school at a time, one interest at a time. And it's kind of flipping, to me, it's flipping the idea that we know what students need, and then we're going to do that to them, to being curious about what matters to students and doing that with them and having the work matter. And I've seen, I was really skeptical of Big Picture, actually, when I was first exposed to it in 2005. I was like, what is this? But I've heard so many students and adults say it's the first time they could be themselves and that they were valued. And I felt that for myself as well. It's starting with, it's starting with the human and keeping it with the human.
Wow. So what might that look like if we talk to a student, or if you can think of an example of how that plays out?
Man, there's so many. Give me an interest area, or give me something to go with.
Playing the guitar.
The guitar. I just thought of a student named Dallas. So at first interaction, I've heard so many students say in our interviews, or when they visited our school, or not all of our schools do interviews, but they were asked, and genuinely asked, what they're curious about. Or I heard a principal today say something like, how do your siblings know you? How are you known on the block, right? And it's what's important to you. What do you want to feel like when you're 30? And it's starting with those. And to me, like when I'm working with young people, and working with schools, in order to be able to serve somebody well, I feel like I want to get to know their vision of their best self. And so with a student who's has interest in music or guitar, it's trying to understand what that interest means to them. I heard a principal today talking about a student who overdosed, and is no longer with us. And she was talking about how last year they've made this shift to be a lot more interest driven, and they're doing really amazing work. And she said last year, when the student expressed interest in fishing, they took that interest and tried to be student centered, right? And they took that interest and they had the student write reports about fishing. And looking back on that, she said, she thinks he might still be alive if she had met that interest and asked him what that meant to him, and maybe asked him to teach her something about fishing, but not try to make it into school. And I think about what that looks like. It's, there's another great story of a student who a lot of our school students engage in internships, connected with their interests. And the student kept having these great internships, I guess. And the student said he was interested in auto repair or something. So they kept setting him up with these great mentors who were in the field of, auto mechanics or whatever. And the student would show up a few times and then would ditch the internships, and they couldn't understand it. And it was frustrating. And somebody had the idea to ask him, like, tell me about your interest in auto repair. Like, where'd that start? What does that mean to you? And the student, I guess, told a story about working with his uncle in his driveway on cars. And they're like, well, what do you guys talk about? And it came out that they used to talk about their Greek heritage or something like that. And so his next internship was at a Greek heritage center. And apparently it was fabulous, right? And right. So a student who says they're interested in guitar, I want to know what that means to them, because it might mean something very different to me than it does to them.
Absolutely. Yeah. Building a guitar or classical guitar or heavy metal, who knows? Right.
Or maybe, and with me, I played a lot of baseball in high school, right? And my interest in baseball was not playing baseball. My interest in baseball was, it was a time where my father and I had this like really strong and powerful connection. It was a time where I felt like I was a part of a team, right? And that was my interest in baseball. But people tried to push me to pursue an interest in baseball that they had, and that wasn't the right direction.
Nice. Yeah, that makes really good sense. So connect the dots. This student-driven, interest-driven philosophy, how can that help end the achievement gap and the lack of equity in our educational institutions?
Well, I think I went several different places in my brain as you were saying that. And, some of the biggest indicators of why students are seemingly not engaging with our schools, right, a lot of them are around relevance.
Yes.
Right. So to me, the singest, oftentimes I think when we're looking at achievement gaps, we're really looking at relevance gaps. And we focus on achievement gaps. I think we often put too much of the blame on students, right? And, you're not engaging, right, with what you're supposed to be engaging with, or we know what you need better than you do. And I think it's flipping, and it's starting with the student. I mean, if we had this mantra a while, it was like, relentlessly focus on, we had these distinguishers, like relentlessly focus on our distinguishers, one student at a time. I mean, if we're doing everything we can, one student at a time, I imagine that a lot of these achievement gaps would vanish. And we've seen that. I mean, schools that are serving the most marginalized students and families in their community, and schools I remember at one point we saw that one of the schools I was working with, the average student, high school student at this school, missed something like 29 days of school the year before they came to this school. Right?
Wow.
And, right. The attendance, like it was like, and then the average student was missing 5 days, right, the year after coming to the school. And so I think by making it, the more we can do to make things relevant and connecting students with adult experts. I mean, in a lot of schools, I think, I've worked in schools in, inner city LA and Seattle and a little bit in Florida, and as a teacher, and so many times students were saying, why am I learning this? Why am I learning this? Right. And a lot of the times I the best answer, most honest answer I could give was, I don't know. Or in interest-driven schools, forget big picture, in interest-driven schools, we're asking the students, why are you learning this? Right? Why are you choosing to do this? And they have the answers to that. And
I
so,
love that flip from why do I have to do this to teachers asking the students, why are you doing this? That's such a that's where the emphasis should be.
Yeah. I can share lots of data points, but so many schools I've been with or schools I've watched, right? Like there's a school in Reno who had single digit graduation rates, right? It was a alternative school. And this story plays out a lot, right? Alternative school where unfortunately a lot of young people and adults are pushed into. And a lot of young people and adults that a lot of maybe more mainstream folks don't want to be around or don't know how to be around. And the school went from a single digit graduation rate to leading the district in graduation rate without changing who they were serving, but changing how they were serving.
Wow, absolutely. I hear exactly what you're saying, Loren. Our micro school has a lot of kids that did not feel like they were thriving in their larger school. And we have a low student teacher ratio, 5-1. And our motto is we want every kid to be seen, heard, valued, and thriving. And when there's meaning, it makes all the difference. So I want Lead Prep to evolve and be able to even more fully embrace what big picture learning is doing, because it's got to be about the individual kids, and anything else isn't going to do it.
I heard a principal talking recently about how one of his goals is we're talking about, goals with individual students, and he named an individual student, and his mission right now, or his work with that student, is shifting it from that student thinks that they struggled in traditional school because something was wrong with them, right? And this principal is helping that student understand that it wasn't something wrong with this young person. It was something wrong with, how he was being served.
But that is so true. I mean, look at this. We take 11-year-olds and put them in this mass assembly line with all these other hormonal 11, 12, 13-year-olds. And we take them from one loving teacher to 6 or 7 teachers a day. And we say, hey, they have executive functioning issues. Can you imagine if you or I had to shift gears 6 or 7 times a day for 6 or 7 different bosses?
Right.
It's totally a systemic issue, and kids feel broken and wrong when they can't navigate something that few of us would navigate as adults. Even college kids don't take 7 subjects at the same time. So I could completely agree with you.
Yeah. And I love that analogy, or you brought that up with the executive functioning, all that. I think a lot of the times those labels are what we're really diagnosing is the system. And I'm not saying the system in like a big way. Like we're diagnosing the failures of our approach when we label students with certain things, and not saying that some of them don't exist outside of school, but I think a lot of the labels, I'm increasingly convinced, and maybe this is going too far or too negative, but I'm increasingly convinced that schools are the most harmful institution in our society, the tangible institution.
I completely agree. And it just shocks me how numbed out everybody is to it. Oh, this is what I had. This is what my kids are going to have. That we're all just perpetuating this most harmful institution.
And I saw that she's now 7. My daughter going into kindergarten, and at my daughter's kindergarten, they weren't allowed to talk at lunch for the first half of lunch. Right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. A 5-year-old. Right. And she started to come home and talk about, for the first time, what reward would she get for being nice, right, at home. And we asked her about that, like, what's going on there? And it's like, well, at school, I get a star for opening the door for people. Like, I'll give you a packet of stars if you want, and you can give yourself stars. But I told her that, and I did this in front of her. Asked her teacher to stop giving her stars. And there's that study. I wish I could recall it now, but the number of questions, a young person asks, it drops by like, tenfold or something for every year of schooling they have. And
oh my gosh,
to me, that's tragic.
Yeah, the curiosity, we drive it out of them because they're widgets on this assembly line that are supposed to be on this page in this chapter.
Right. But in a positive front, I heard somebody, once talk about the wonder and awe of young people. Like, so on a positive front, I think the more wonder and awe we can build into what we're doing with young people and each other. I think part of the beauty, of our design elements is that we really try to practice what we're talking about. And so, how do we maintain our own wonder and awe? How do we pursue our own interests and support that and model that with students, right? Like humanizing, I think a huge part of this is humanizing the adults. The adults in the system, it did not occur to me until I was a teacher that teachers were people. And that's really sad.
Yes. I agree. Yeah, I was in a grocery store when I taught kindergarten, and a kid saw me, and it was like, "Oh, you eat food?" Oh my gosh! Yeah.
Right.
It's crazy. So, Loren, how we know that true systemic change can't just happen through an individual school, like my micro school, or individual philosophy, like big picture learning. How can we get to this overall policy change so that we're not the most harmful institution out there?
That question is what drives me.
Yeah, I can't wrap my head around it. So if you can't either, it's just like, well, what can we do?
Well, if I could tell you something exciting, I think that's moving in that direction.
Yeah.
I wouldn't pretend to have an answer to that. And I think if anybody did, then, we'd be doing it, I hope. In the Northwest right now, I'm engaging with 15 or so schools, and we're trying to explore what it means to, activate our power as a region so we can activate the power of young people. And this is new, right? I think some of the things that have come out of this, Elliot, one of our co-founders, talks about a meshwork, right? We're kind of a meshwork, and what we do influences each other. And so in this regional approach to change, principals are sharing their problems of practice and helping each other strategize. We, recently, we have this weekly leaders meeting, and one of the things we wrestled with for a while is like, what actions did we take this week to address racial injustice, right? And what were our missed actions this week as well? And I think we've developed this place where we can be real and vulnerable about that. And I love it. One of the people I was in a breakout room with was sharing, how she feels like she had a lot of missed opportunities this week to take action. And I'm connecting that to how do we address systemic change? I think, and I think Big Picture has been doing this for a really long time of connecting people across contexts and, focusing on our practice and developing communities of practice, and also developing strategies around how do we influence policy? How do we move practice to policy? I was on a call I keep saying I was on a call this morning, but it's part of how I learned. I was on a call this morning with an advisor who was talking about how he brought the mayor to internships of his town and city council members. And
wow.
Yeah, and enlisted people in this. And he said, when the mayor of his town was able to see what young people are doing in their internships and hear their stories in their exhibitions, it changes how that mayor is thinking about education.
Oh my gosh. Yes. So not only are the kids getting a different exposure, but we're educating the mentors, the adults, the mayor. That's a brilliant way. And I think it's going to take a lot of these grassroots efforts to slowly shift policy.
Yeah. And I think it's part education. I think also part healing or unlearning. I remember I had another mayor, deputy mayor, visit our school one time, and she spent an hour or two with a small group of young women. And the next day she wrote me this really powerful email that said, I remember part of it said something to the effect of, "Thank you for reminding me why I got into public service in the first place. This brought me back to what I'm supposed to be doing."
Yes. Oh, I love that. I'm going to shift just a little bit because I am really big into anti-hate, and we're working hard to become a no place for hate school this year through ADL, and it's a student-led initiative. And it seems like nobody's comfortable using the L word in the in the educational context. But you do it at Big Picture Learning, and you and I, when we spoke a few months ago, you threw that out there, and it's like, yes, please. So I'm wondering if you could talk about this vitally important human capacity, love, and how it ties into learning.
I don't know how to separate the two. This is such a big, beautiful topic. So thank you.
I know.
I'm pausing because I feel like you just showed me this giant sunset, and I want to look at it a little bit. But we have 4 leadership elements, and one of these elements is love. The first one is love, right? And if acting out of love and addressing disequities in our systems, serving one student at a time, they're all acts of love, and I believe that that's what brings educators into our schools and folks into district leadership is a love for young people and a love for the future of young people. I think that's what's at our core. And so that unlearning or reminding of really who we are as individuals and what we're trying to do. But you walk through the Big Picture school and you hear adults saying I love you to each other.
That is so priceless.
And meaning it. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. And I think when somebody's coming from a place of love, right? I think you're a lot more likely to be accepting. You're a lot more likely to forgive, engage, avoid power struggles. I think those will happen, right? But when it's coming from a place of love, I think you can repair, restore. The work around belonging and restorative practices, I think those are all, at their heart, they're really all about love. And I think, it's easy for a lot of folks in education, or it's easier, I think, to state an appreciation for the importance of relationships. And I think we need to go farther and make it a lot easier for us to state the importance of love.
Absolutely. I agree. And what we are doing is based on love. I don't know why it's so taboo, because I think you're right. Owning all of that just melts away so much of the barriers that are artificial that can be erected between us. I agree. Relationships is a key point, but it's really, relationships are based on that element of love.
Yeah.
Now I'm taking in the sunset. So, Loren, I have one last question for you. If you had a magic wand, what would you do to make this love, this systemic change that ends oppression and creates equal access to learning and resources in our schools? What magic wand wish would you have for education?
I think I'd give the magic wand to a young person.
Wow. That really says a lot. That says a lot about how Big Picture Learning isn't just this philosophy. It's ingrained in who you are. Oh, yeah,
absolutely. I mentioned this in the beginning that I think the two, I think I first saw this restorative practices, but that quadrant of 2, 4, with. And, a lot of the times we do things for young people and there's a place for that. And we do things to young people and there's a place for that. But I think there's a lot more opportunity for us to do things with young people. And yeah, I would trust young people to wave that magic wand.
Absolutely. I think they're the ones out there we know in our Seattle area doing a lot to say, hey, we want change. Why wouldn't we trust our young people? Wow. Loren, I know I'm going to have you come back and talk some more. There are just so many more things we could be unpacking and so much more you have to add to this conversation on education evolution. But Thank you so much for being our guest today.
I've really enjoyed it. What a great way to end a week, too. Thank you.
Loren and Big Picture Learning show us one of the most relevant and progressive philosophies into practice in the world of education. Truly learner-centered is not, as Loren said, trying to take a student passion and make it into school. I know I've been guilty of stopping at that initial step of adding student agency to school. We're called to return the wonder and awe to learning. The basis for any deep learning is positive relationships. We count on this at my micro school and intentionally employ a low teacher-student ratio to allow time for teachers to really connect with each student. Relationships is a safe way to label what Loren clarifies is truly love. I agree with his rhetorical question. How can we separate love and learning? Love is creating that safe space for learning. Mistakes, humanity, belonging. It is so much more than a relationship. It's an environment and a promise to see the good and work through any problems, to not give up. Most educators deeply love their students, whether they're comfortable using that word or not. I don't believe hate crimes and serial killing would be on the uprise if schools were places where each student felt loved. Our often inhumane one-size-fits-all schools can make a student feel invisible, unsafe, or unloved. If they don't feel like they matter, how can they go out and treat others well? Schools are a huge influence in a child's world. We don't want to be the most harmful institution in their lives, as Loren said. We want to be a source of love. In Rocky Blessy Bragg's Medium article, Dear Education, Love Your Students and Make Sure They Know, he says that it may be an unpopular opinion, but students learn the most and desire to when they know you care about them and their success. And he cites some statistics that talk about our first job as teachers is to make sure that we learn our students, that we connect with them on a real level, showing respect for their culture and affirming their worthiness to receive the best education possible. There is a lot of research that talks about how solid positive relationships are the foundation for academic excellence. I've included 2 more articles in the show notes to challenge us. The first challenges us to check our unconscious biases or stereotypes, as that is one way to be capable of greater love and awareness and better serve our learners. The second article asks us to live our love actively by acknowledging and boldly challenging racism. I know that is such an uncomfortable topic for so many of us, but we need to keep having this conversation and keep evolving. Until statistics show that Black lives have the same opportunities, achievement, and advantages as white lives, we have to confront and combat racism. Yes, both of these challenges make us uncomfortable. But if not us, who? If not now, when? Let's add more love into our schools and world today. If you're finding yourself thinking, I need to do this in my school, let's talk about it. I consult with schools to help them find new, innovative solutions to reaching every student. Let's put together an action plan. Visit educationevolution.org/consult to book a call, and let's get started. Education Evolution listeners, you are the ones to ensure we create classrooms where each student is seen, heard, valued, and thriving. We need you. Let's go out and reach every student today. I'd be so grateful if you'd head over to your podcast app to give a great rating and review if you found this episode valuable. Don't wait. Please do it right now before you forget. I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening. Signing off, I am Maureen O'Shaughnessy, your partner in boldly reimagining education.